Today, we are going to create an original ghost world together. I am a young adult supernatural thriller author, so I write a lot about ghosts. And today, I'm going to build an original ghost world with you and show you how I create a system of ghosts and the sort of questions that I would ask myself when trying to figure out how ghosts would work in my story. And then, after we have a ghost world, I'm going to create an original story using all of the ghosts in my world. So stick around if you like talking about ghosts. And if you are writing a story about ghosts, this is the video for you. If you are new to my channel, hello, welcome. My name is Claire Fraze, and I'm the award-winning author of young adult supernatural thriller They Stay, which follows a girl whose brother goes missing, who has to work with another girl who has the ability to see ghosts, and they discover this whole creepy supernatural plot in their town. I make videos on this channel sharing the actionable writing tips that helped me make my writing better. Every single writer is different, and what works for them is different, so I share the things that worked for me in the hopes that they might also work for you. Before we get into the content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I post videos twice a week and do live streams twice a month. And without further ado, let's start building this ghost world. So the first thing that you have to do when creating a system for ghosts is deciding what genre you'd like your ghost world to be in. You can have comedic ghosts, and the world building is going to be very different for funny ghosts and comedic ghosts than it will be for horror ghosts and ghosts that you are intending to inflict horror onto your readers. Ghosts in horror stories are notoriously underexplained. They are not predictable, they are powerful, whereas ghosts in more comedic works are more like real people, but they have like slightly different abilities. So I think for the sake of this video, we're gonna stick to horror ghosts, but just know that if you wanted to write comedic ghosts, really the secret to doing that, in my experience anyway, is explaining as much as you can about the system of ghosts, because the more that your readers know about the system of ghosts, the less scary the ghosts are. So we're gonna keep things vague in our ghost world building video today and make it more scary. But yeah, if you're trying to write comedic ghosts and you want more tips on that, drop a comment below. I'm happy to chat with you about it. So last year at around this time, I made a video called World Building Tips: How to Build a Ghost World. And in that video, I shared a lot of the advice that I had received about how to create a ghost world from scratch. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to play a section of that video where I list off a bunch of questions that I asked myself when creating my ghost world, pause the video, and answer all of these questions in a sort of Google Doc. So I've written down all of the questions already in a separate doc just so I can keep track of the answers. And yeah, I think this would be a fun way to do this. So let's start this initial brainstorming process. I'm already really excited for this because there are a lot of ghost tropes that I love that I was not able to use in my book They Stay, so let's get into this. Do ghosts stay on Earth forever after dying? Okay, so do ghosts stay on Earth forever after dying? For the sake of this world, I mean, there are no wrong answers that you can give to any of these questions, but for the sake of the world that we're gonna be building today, I'm gonna say, let's say maybe no. I'm gonna say no, ghosts don't stay on Earth forever after dying. Ghosts, I like to think of ghosts as memories, as sort of like, I really like that trope of ghosts reflecting people's memory and care for them, and also ghosts being tied into the trauma that they went through on Earth in some way. So I think I'm gonna say that no, they don't stay on Earth forever after dying. They fade away eventually. Either when, like the only ghosts that become ghosts are ones that have some sort of trauma to work through, and that they're able to fade away after they've worked through that trauma. Like, I like that trope, you know, in a lot of horror movies where you have the, like, teenage witch who, you know, went through something really horrible while she was alive, and then now she's, like, cursing everyone in the town, but then as soon as they're able to, like, say, this was really horrible what happened to you, she is able to kind of accept that and not be a ghost anymore. I'm thinking of that movie Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. No spoilers, although maybe this is kind of a spoiler, so I should leave it out. I'm not going to explain it. It's not a spoiler if I don't explain it. Okay, so no, they fade away eventually, but only once they have worked through their trauma. Okay, moving on. Does everybody become a ghost? If not, who does? Okay, does everybody become a ghost? If not, who does? So my previous thing kind of explained this a little bit. So not everybody becomes a ghost. The people that go through immeasurable trauma do become ghosts. So not everyone becomes a ghost. Please excuse my horrible typing because I'm trying to type and record and everything at the same time. But the people who experience trauma do. Okay, so for the sake of this story, what does trauma what does trauma mean? We have to kind of define trauma in order to figure out what the differentiating factor is between people who become ghosts and people who don't become ghosts. I'm comfortable defining trauma as some really intense emotion. So something like murder or betrayal, something that would make someone angry, something that would make someone resentful, or some secret that they knew that they were buried with that didn't come out after they died. So some secret that they like want other people to know about. So like secret, I can already smell a story here. They were buried with, etc. I'm gonna say no to things like love and the more positive emotions. Like these negative emotions are gonna be the ones that make people ghosts, which is already gonna also help inform some of our answers to the latter questions in this list. So these negative emotions, please hold while I type this out. Excellent, okay. Let us continue playing the video. Does being a ghost change the way that you act? Are you made a more angry version of yourself, or are you the exact same? Okay, so does being a ghost change the way that you act? I think that if the people who become ghosts generally, hold on, I'm gonna put all of these little titles into bold so it's easier to read them. So if the people who become ghosts are the people who experience some sort of trauma or are holding on to really traumatic emotions from the time that they were alive, I don't even think like being a ghost would need to change the way that they act or twist their mind in any way, because they're already going to be more inclined to be like the traditional horror ghost stereotypes if you have a bunch of like angry, resentful, secret-having ghosts. So for this question, I'm gonna say no. I think over time, maybe, you know, you become a little bit more of a faded memory. What we have to figure out next, I'm not sure if this is gonna be somewhere in the questions, we're gonna go back over these questions after we have preliminary answers to all of them and like figure out how they all interplay with each other. Because something we have to figure out is whether ghosts are able to sort of like fade into less present versions of themselves, like after a really long time. Do they become like just, you know, a faint memory, like a little spot of energy or something just that gets, you know, a sound or makes you feel something, like a very pale figure of what they used to be? Or they just kind of disappear once their trauma on Earth is resolved. So like whether over time they fade away into smaller versions of themselves, or if they become more angry, they become more powerful. I'm just gonna choose one for this story. I think that instead of having them be more memory ghosts, I think I'm just going to stick with the trauma thing. So once their trauma resolves, they just disappear like poof, like they're gone, instead of having them slowly fade into lesser versions of themselves. So let me write this all down. Okay, let's keep playing the video. What is life like as a ghost? Is it miserable? Is it okay? Is it really good? So what is life like as a ghost? So I think if the people who are ghosts now because of trauma, please forgive me for all this repetition, but repeating it to myself like this starts to help me figure out what the world would look like. I think if the people who experience trauma are the ones who become ghosts, I think life is pretty horrible as a ghost. I think that, let me spell that correctly. I think when you're a ghost, you're alone, you're lonely, you're angry. You can see all of these people who wronged you potentially get to continue their lives, and your anger might build and grow and justify you doing all of these horrible things because nobody can talk to you or anything. So it's lonely, it's cold, it's angry, miserable, etc. Moving on. Can ghosts move through things? If so, are there any materials that they can't move through? Let's scroll down here a little bit. I'm gonna say that ghosts can move through things, but they are limited to the general place where their trauma or emotions are wrapped up in. So like haunting. So yes, they can move through things. They can move through coffins type things that you would find in cemeteries because they'd have to escape the coffins that they were potentially buried in, but they just can't travel that far. I mean, I don't know if I want to put like a feet number on how far they can go, and I don't know if I want to tie them to an object. That's another ghost trope that I like, is like if you destroy the amulet, you also destroy their soul or something, because that actually gives you a way that the ghosts could die. But that's pretty tropey. Maybe we'll think of something a little more original for our world. Let's be a little creative here. Let's say that they can move through wood and dirt and organic materials, but they can't move through certain types of metals. Let's pick a metal. In They Stay, I do cast iron because that's the one that like a lot of cemetery gates are made out of. And I think that that's kind of cool, having like cast iron be something that ghosts can't move through. If you wanted to do kind of a more religious twist on the ghosts, you could do like objects imbued with some sort of, blessing or like holy water or something like that. I think let's stick with cast iron though. I don't know enough about religion to make any of my ghost worlds based around religion, but if that's something that you're doing, that's very cool, and you'll definitely know more about this than I will. I also have this cool idea of like maybe the ghosts can't move through certain walls if they were built out of a certain thing, so like, or if there is some material like maybe mixed into cement that they couldn't get through, or something like that. Like I'm thinking about traditional haunted manors, or even something that you might find in a normal house that ghosts cannot move through. I'm not sure, but let's stick with cast iron for now. We can come back to this if we think of something better later. Do ghosts maintain their physical appearance on Earth when dead? Okay, do ghosts maintain their physical appearance on Earth when dead? This is a tricky one. This is one, like, if you don't approach it, like, there's just so many opportunities for plot holes in this one, and like things that just don't make any sense, because there are so many different appearances that people take on day to day. Like, what pair of clothes is the ghost going to be wearing? Like the pair of clothes that they died in, or the pair of clothes that like best captured who they are? Are they allowed to like switch their clothes? Are they all just naked ghosts? Like maybe they're all naked ghosts. I love that for them. In my book They Stay, I chose to have all of my ghosts maintain their exact human forms, because they were very real to my character Francesca, who's able to see them and who's been able to see them her entire life. And they aren't the source of horror in the book. They're more like friends and family members to her. So because the system of ghosts that we're building today is more of a horror-based system and we're trying to make it scary, I think we're gonna say no, they don't maintain their physical appearance after dying, that they're more like human shapes. Not entirely human. And if they, because I think this is really creepy, if they died in a really traumatic way, we're gonna have, like if they died by axe to the head, they're still gonna have that axe in their head as a ghost, or like a really, really gaping wound, because the marks of trauma take a long time to disappear. So if their death was traumatic, they maintain the scars from it. So like if they died in a house fire, they would be burned all over, and just, stuff like that, just to keep it a little bit creepy. Okay, moving on to our next questions. Can ghosts affect anything in the physical world? What can they make happen? Can they make things fall off of bookcases? Okay, so can ghosts affect anything in the material world? If we're gonna write a horror story, I'm gonna say yes, because ghosts who cannot affect anything in the material world are not very scary to humans. But if they can affect anything in the material world, we have to figure out what they affect in the material world. So if you want to get really scientific with this, so I had a really, really wonderful conversation with Emma Berquist on this channel a couple of months ago, and she is a young adult author who writes about ghosts in her wonderful novel, Missing Presumed Dead, which was fantastic and had this really, really interesting system of ghosts that I adored. And when I asked her about her ghost world building, she said that she approached it in a really scientific way, and a more, centered around physics sort of way. So she was like, all right, if ghosts are a type of energy, what kind of energy are they? And, if they're energy, then they would be warm, they wouldn't be cold. And it was a very like, if ghosts exist, what exactly would it look like? So if you wanted to do that, then, and have them, be a sort of energy, they, in her book, were able to affect things like electricity and lights, and they could make the lights flicker, the lights go out, and things like that. But I don't know if I want to do that for this book. I think that if they're old and powerful enough, they can move things. Like if they can knock books off of bookcases, they can make chandeliers swing, they can kind of throw things. So I'm going to say yes, but I'm going to be vague about what they can and can't do because that's going to make it scarier. So vague powers, can knock things around, can also lock doors because that's a big horror trope that's scary. Yeah, I want them to be able to do scary things. I also want them to be able to like appear to the main characters, appear at will, be truly terrifying in all the best horror-y ways. Can anything kill ghosts? Can anything deter ghosts? Do any incantations summon ghosts? So can anything kill ghosts or summon them? There are a lot of different systems for this in fiction. You have people that, can say different incantations to summon ghosts. You have supernatural, where I think you can douse them with salt or holy water and stab them with iron, I think, and that kills ghosts. Or you have to salt and burn their corpse, and then that will kill a ghost. I think that you as the author have to come up with your own specific system. Ooh, I'm gonna bold all the questions again to make this look nicer. Personally, I'm a sucker for creative ways to kill ghosts, so for the sake of this story, let's think of something very out of the box to do that doesn't have to do with their bodies or objects that mattered to them. Let's think of something super random. Please hold while I try to come up with some ideas. Okay, so this is really kind of creepy, but let's just for the sake of this world say that the only way to kill a ghost is to complete the purpose that they wanted, or like the thing that they wanted to happen and the reason that they're holding on to all of this trauma. So like if somebody killed them, it would be to kill the person who killed them, and that's the only way to dispel their ghost. Or if they died hiding a secret, the only thing to kill them is to expose that secret. You don't necessarily kill ghosts, but you can dispel them by kind of completing their purpose. And if you can find like out of the box ways to do this, then you can also kill the ghosts. Like you don't necessarily have to kill the person, but you have to kill them and bring them back to life. Like you can, kill them and then bring them back through CPR. I mean, whatever. Like, but they have to be dead and then you have to bring them back, because that would have a lot of opportunity for creepy plot stuff. Once the ghosts complete their purpose, then they no longer have to be ghosts. Okay, so can incantations defer ghosts? I'm going to say no to this question. I think it would make a really cool scene to have our main characters try to dispel a ghost with an incantation and have it go horribly wrong. So no. Although I am a sucker for like potions and things in fiction. Like if they're able to like create some sort of creepy potion and like use that to dispel a ghost, that could be cool. So, if they had like, a rat's head mixed with a toad's tongue or whatever, and they created this potion and sprinkled it around the room, like that could be a way to dispel ghosts. But if you have potions, then that might, bring in some other weird magical world building stuff. So I'm not sure if I want to go there. Can ghosts move everywhere, or are they bound by anything? Okay, so can ghosts move anywhere? I'm going to see if we can like pick up the pace because we've been talking about these questions for a while. Can ghosts move anywhere, or are they stuck somewhere? I'm going to say that they were like stuck in some sort of, I'm pretty sure we answered this already, like stuck in some radius of where they died or experienced their worst trauma, so they haunt the place. Is the ghost realm a sort of purgatory place before they move on to a final afterlife, or is this the afterlife? I also don't really know the answer to this here. I'm not sure if it's going to be relevant to our story, so I'm going to make a note-only answer. gosh, this formatting. Only answer if relevant to the story. Excellent. Moving on. Can ghosts possess people? I'm gonna say in this world, no. If you were writing a book where you needed to have ghosts possess people, then of course have them possess people. This is an interesting way to write a book because we are world building first and then we are coming up with the plot after. A lot of the times when I do it, like with They Stay, I came up with the plot before and then I world built. Is it world built or world build it? It's definitely not world build it. I don't even know what I'm saying. For They Stay, I built the plot and then built the world afterwards. So if that's also what you're doing, I assume probably if you already have a story in mind and you know you want to write about ghosts, you have an idea of what kind of story you want it to be. But if you don't and you just want to build a world and pick a genre and then work backwards, that's another way you can do it. I've just never actually done this before with a story. It's also the case that if I were to start writing this book and I came up with a really cool idea for a ghost possession, I can just change the rules of the ghost worlds as long as I hadn't already established that ghosts could not do that earlier in the book. And I can, rewrite the book and have it be possible that possession happened. Plot and world building has to communicate with each other. There is an organic dialogue and feeding off of each other that has to happen during this process of brainstorming and coming up with your book. Can anyone in your world see ghosts naturally? I find that the scariest ghosts are impossible to see. So because this is a horror ghost world, I'm gonna say no. They can't see them naturally, but if the ghosts show themselves to the person, then they can see them. Or if the ghost is disappearing. I just had, a vision of like a big ball of light as this ghost explodes as, the main characters defeat them. Because, this is going to be a happy ending horror, probably not a miserable everybody dies ending horror. Are there any objects that allow your characters to see ghosts? I'm going to say no. Just, because it won't be relevant to the story, and They Stay it is relevant to the story. Are there any other supernatural elements in your world, like ley lines or supernatural energy? I know that I'm pretty sure it was Raven Boys, the young adult series, they talk about ley lines and how ley lines deliver some sort of supernatural energy that can affect the ghosts. I never actually finished that book. I only got halfway through and kind of got bored and never picked it up again, so I'm not really sure how the rest of the world works. But now we have to decide whether that's going to happen with these guys. I think it's going to depend on how my main characters actually end up defeating the ghost, but if the only way to defeat the ghost is by doing what the ghost set out to do, so like killing their enemy or whatever, then I don't think it's going to be relevant whether or not they can use ley lines to defeat the ghost, unless they're trying to think of some sort of weird way to get around doing that. But I think the conflict would be the most interesting if they had to satisfy the ghost in some way by doing something they didn't want to do. So also for this question, I'm going to say no. Okay, so the initial world building process is now over. We have like general ideas and answers to all the questions that I put forth in that other video about ghost world building. So now it's time to try to take all of those answers and put them together into something resembling a general idea for a world. I think this plot's going to be generally pretty straightforward, but basically the general idea that all of these answers to these questions are pointing toward is a world in which the only people who become ghosts are the people with some serious trauma to work through, and those people with that trauma are bound to a specific location, a location where they were killed really horribly, where they learned something really horrible, where, they went through some sort of emotional turmoil and something needs to be resolved. And that is why they become a ghost. They are not able to be at peace yet, so they are in this purgatory ghost-like state. The only way to help them move on from this purgatory ghost-like state is to resolve whatever trauma it is that they left Earth with. So if, somebody brutally murdered them, to brutally murder, or not necessarily brutally murder, but kill the person who brutally murdered them, try saying that 3 times fast, or do something else like reveal the secret that they had on their deathbed or something like that, then that would allow the ghost to move on. Being a ghost doesn't fundamentally change who somebody is mentally, but the people who do stay as ghosts are generally more angry because they have some sort of thing to resolve or a bone to pick with someone still on Earth. And the powers that the ghosts have are pretty vague. So they can affect things in the human world. They can do things like lock doors and threaten people and hurt people and even kill people in the regular world, because this is going to be a horror story and we want the readers and viewers to be really freaked out by all the things that the ghosts can do. So now that we have all of those questions answered, we can start putting them together into a general form of a story. So I like to create outlines in the form of plot grids, but before I create those plot grids, I like having a general understanding of what the story would be, you know, who the characters are, what the beginning, middle, and end would be, etc. So I'm just gonna like brainstorm out loud with you just so you can kind of get an idea of what my process looks like when trying to come up with a story idea from a world, like a world that I've already built. So what do we know about this world? We know that there are trauma ghosts. We want there to be a point in the book where the ghost antagonist wants someone to die. That is the only way they'll disappear. I think that will end up being, that revelation will be the midpoint, because that shifts the genre of the book and will change the stakes. I mean, it doesn't shift the genre, but it shifts what kind of book it's going to be, because up until then it'll be like, oh my god, there's a ghost haunting us, and after that is like, oh my god, how are we going to get out of this, and how are we going to make it so this person dies. We want the person who is going to have to die someone that the characters really love. Maybe that would add another layer of conflict. I don't want to do classic haunted house for this one. I think that that's a little bit too boring. What is some sort of really random location that they could haunt? I know they are like cruises, because then you get the isolation trope of being stuck somewhere. You can like be on, you know, a traveling train. Those are like big locations though. What's somewhere super random? I've always wanted to set a book or a horror book at one of those like haunted houses with the actors. So I wonder if that could be something. Like some people are showing up dead at one of those like haunted corn mazes with the actors or something. And the characters have to figure out who is killing them and what they can do to stop it. Okay, so let's run with this for a second. Let's do like beloved family run outdoor corn maze type outfit that in the fall, I mean, it's like, you know, maybe a farm, and then in the fall they do the whole haunted corn maze thing to like, you know, bring in some money. Maybe they're like a struggling farm, you know, a kind of very endearing mom and pop, like family run business, and everyone, like, you know, we make them super likable characters, like small family run farm. Then maybe we have someone show up dead, and then the corn maze shuts down, and then the corn maze starts, you know, or maybe someone shows up dead and the corn maze has to shut down for the season because someone showed up dead, and then the ghost of the corn maze starts drawing more people into the corn and killing them, so it's not just a one-off thing. And the characters, maybe like the teenage daughter of the people in the farm, because, you know, I always write YA, of the people who run the farm have to go in and figure out how they're going to stop this vengeful ghost inside the farm. I also love horror stories in farms, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre type vibe to it would be really creepy. Like slasher in the corn. If you watched my horror trope video, you know I'm a sucker for a good horror corn story. This isn't really a haunted house with the actors, but it's still got that kind of, I like the small family run type thing a little bit more for this story than the haunted house with the actors, so we're just gonna run with it. But you know, if I had more time, maybe I'd go back and forth and decide on the other one, but for now we're gonna go with the farm. So in order to kind of come up with a basic framework for this story, we need a beginning, we need a middle, and we need an end. The middle is the midpoint. We also need an inciting incident, which is in the beginning. We need a point of entry. These are kind of my biggest plot points that I like to use when plotting out books. So you have the point of entry, the inciting incident, the midpoint, the climax, and the resolution. Those are like my big five that I always use. So for your point of entry for this story, I did a video on point of entries and how to write an effective point of entry. You want your point of entry to say something about your main character or something about your ghost character or antagonistic force, you want it to signal to your readers the type of story that it's going to be. So in our case, that's going to be creepy ghost horror. And you also want it to signal something about your climax or the main conflict of the book. So it takes a little bit of time to like really nail an artful point of entry. So ours is not going to be artful. This is like first draft point of entry, just something that, you know, gets you into the story. Maybe we don't start with this. So let's start with the midpoint because we already know what that is. So we know that the midpoint is going to be like the ghost antagonist wants someone to die and that's the only way they'll disappear. The inciting incident is someone dying at the corn maze. We want that to probably happen like at the end of chapter 1. And we want, you know, like maybe it's somebody who's really important to the teen character. We also want to be, this is something we didn't talk about in the ghost world building section of the video, but we want to make sure that the ghost, like if they have multiple victims, they have some sort of logic for how they're choosing those victims. So maybe victims that are connected to their major enemy in some way. So in our case, whoever the ghost is going to want to enact revenge on the person who killed them and maybe like killed them and betrayed them and stabbed them in the back and they died with this terrible secret. Like we'll make it really, really bad. So yeah, maybe like the person who dies first is like their niece or nephew or grandchild or something, depending on how old the ghost is. And we want to make sure that there's some sort of system of logic so that we can have that really satisfying moment where our like teen detectives are like, oh, but this person and this person and this person, and fitting all the pieces together in a way that like is actually logical. We want them to have the opportunity to be able to work backwards from that. Okay, so then we have the climax, which is them fighting the ghost, killing the person who they want or who the ghost wants dead, and trying to bring them back. We also need a major theme for this story. I also always like to have a major theme for my stories. A major theme has to be something that changes from the opening of the book to the end of the book, sort of like something that the character learns or a lesson that the author is trying to convey to the audience. I watched some really amazing courses by this guy named Maxwell Alexander Drake, who talks a lot about this. I've linked some of his books in the description of this video because they've just blown my mind and I really, really love them and highly recommend them as a writing resource. So some examples of major themes are like in Finding Nemo, which is an example that this guy uses in the book. Marlin has to learn how, like, what the best parenting style is, like whether or not to be an overprotective parent or to allow Nemo to kind of come of age on his own. And Nemo also has to kind of discover that he can come of age and he has like a coming of age story. And this whole like major theme of like, is it better to be overprotective or not overprotective is played around a lot in the movie. So I want to come up with some sort of question like that, you know, like some sort of universal human question that this story can be answering and playing around with in some way. Like, is it better to forgive or to enact revenge? I don't know if this is going to be a good major theme. We're just going to put it down as our major theme because, you know, your major theme is also probably going to change as you are developing the book, but having some sort of like big picture thing you want to convey to the audience or tell them about your story or some sort of lesson is going to really ground your story in something that's going to connect to people viscerally. It's not just going to be about all of your plot elements. You're going to be telling like a universal human story that people are familiar with and want to consume, if that makes any sense. So for the major theme, is it better to forgive or to get revenge? Which is more satisfying? Or maybe not which is more satisfying, just like which is better. Because I know, you know, a lot of the times you can get really emotionally invested in something and really want to get revenge, but often getting revenge is not actually satisfying at all. Like, you know, there are a lot of stories where like people finally get their revenge and it's not what they had hyped it up to be in their heads. So we'll toy around with that as the major theme, so that can help inform some of the plot decisions we make when fleshing out this idea. Something about like, you know, the power of forgiveness, could be a cool major theme. Okay, so our first draft point of entry. This is, we're not trying to be perfect here. We're just trying to get something on the page. So our first draft point of entry is not actually going to be about the ghost. It's going to be about our main character, because like in movies, a lot of the times you can do a point of entry that isn't from the main character's point of view, but because I write first person present point of view books, all of my points of entry have to do with my main character, because that's, the viewpoint in which they are seeing the world. So I have to pick something that signals maybe the fact that it's going to be a horror book, and also maybe the conflict. So maybe I'll bring in my main character's connection. So moment between MC and person / BFF who will eventually die in the climax. If this person has to die in order to fulfill the ghost's wish, it's going to make their death a lot more meaningful and sad if like it's set up that they have a crazy connection with the main character right off the bat. Like what if I can't have them be like brother and sister genetically if it's some sort of like weird like relations of the person who ended up killing the ghost. It might have to be something a little bit different than that. So like, let's just maybe keep them like BFFs for now and not make them brother and sister. Unless, and this is like, another kind of out there idea, they think they're biologically brother and sister, and then one of them finds out that they're adopted and actually related to the person that the ghost wants blood from, even though they don't have any like familial connection to the person that the ghost wants revenge on. So that could be like another big twist, is the fact that they're not biologically brother and sister. Let's put that in. That sounds interesting and twisty. So that would be a really cool twist. So we have to kind of figure out if they already know that twist about the biological / adoption by the midpoint when they find out that the ghost antagonist needs somebody to die, or if they find that out later. Like, do they know who the ghost is going to try to kill when the midpoint happens or not? I think that maybe that happens. That's more of like, like a second act climax, like the push into act 3. Second twist, I'm not, naming any of these right because I honestly don't even have them all memorized, but find out that brother isn't biologically brother and genetically related to the person who the ghost wants dead. All right, cool. Another crazy idea would be if like the person who the ghost wants dead is like a sperm donor or something who like, donated a lot of sperm to the town. So there's like no way to track down. I don't think we're going to go there though. That seems more of like a comedy ghost thing, but yeah, I don't know. So resolution, we want a happy ending. So we're going to have the brother not die and leave it at that. Cool. So, that's like a general outline of this really like crazy. I mean, this is like super rough, like I'm just coming up with this on the spot. If I were writing this as a book, I would think a lot more of this through, obviously. But that's just to kind of give you an idea of my brainstorming process. And now that we've done that, let us create kind of a preliminary plot grid so I can show you what plot grids are and kind of how to create one if you are looking into exploring that type of outlining. Okay, so to create a basic plot grid for this story, we need to start by creating some columns. So when I start making a plot grid, the first thing that I do is I write on the top row all of the different names and labels of the columns. So the first one I always do is chapter number. So I can keep track of, chapter 1, chapter 2, and all the different things that need to go in there. The second thing I'm going to do for this story is our plot. So just like the main ghost plot that happens in, this part of the story or whatever. So there should be an entry for every single chapter because every single chapter has to advance this plot. So after this, we can, start playing around with some subplots. Oh, and another column that I actually like to add is the time. So like the day of the week, or if this happens on like a timeline that is very short, keeping track of like what day this is and like whether they're going to be in school or whether it's a weekend and all that kind of stuff. So I put that in there. Okay, so now we're going to start thinking about subplots. So this whole theme about is it better to forgive and to get revenge? There are a bunch of different things that you can do with that. I think on a character level too, to drive that point home, having a bunch of like small vendettas between characters that can kind of be foils to like the big vendetta that they have against the ghost, or that the ghost has against their former killer. eating a cookie. So let's say that we have one foil subplot of MC and ex-BFF and whether or not they're gonna like forgive each other for what happened or something. That can foil the plot between the ghost and their killer. Relationship with brother who ends up, you know, having to die and then come back to life. I don't know, like maybe you want to have a romantic subplot in there. If you want to have a romantic subplot, you put that in there. Obviously, all of these labels would have to be better described. If you were writing this as an actual book, you'd know who all these characters are. But, you know, for our purposes today, I'm trying to give you broad strokes. Oh, another subplot is brother adoption. If we do run with that, you know, like clues to that plot twist, where you're going to drop them, all those sorts of things. Different victims of the ghost. This is just kind of like, you know, and meant to give you a space to monitor all of the most important elements of your book. You don't want to have too many, otherwise things get too complicated, but just monitor, like, you know, the most important ones. I like to put them in bold. I also sometimes like to color code them. I'll have like different colors for different subplots. For now, we're going to keep it very simple. Maybe I'll put all the top, you know, labels in a different color just to, you know, keep it a little different than the rest. Okay, whatever. In chapter 1, you want to have both your point of entry and your inciting incident. I'm going to wrap the text in this because I prefer when the text is wrapped because it just like looks nicer. So that just means that like when you write in it, it's just going to be confined to that box instead of going on linearly into the rest of the boxes. So our first plot, your point of entry, start with MC and brother, show connection, relationship, something about haunted stuff for family, corn maze. Oh, another plot that you can put in is the family falling apart because of all of this bad media attention. Yeah. And then at end of chapter, or maybe this is like the first night of the season, the corn maze opens and then maybe the main character is going through corn maze and finds a dead body. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so this is, I don't know, like Friday night. Cool. All right, so now, you know, you would move on to like, you'd figure out how all of these different things are established. I don't know if you'd have a romantic subplot yet in the first chapter. It depends if your love interest is already introduced. But like, you know, your relationship with brother, that would be established in like their first moment, and you'd describe their first moment here. And then, you know, you'd move on to chapter 2 and you'd do the same thing. You know, like let's say you have about 30 chapters in your book. Mine usually have around 40, or let's say you have around 40. So around chapter 20 is where you want your midpoint to happen. So let's just say that this is chapter 20. And then in here you'd write, you know, like the ghost and like the teen sleuths realize the ghost needs someone to die in order to get rid of them. In here somewhere, you're going to probably want them experimenting, teen sleuths, experimenting, I can't type, with ways to kill ghosts. Like, they learn more about ghosts. Maybe they figure out identity of ghost. More people show up dead, etc. And then you'd flesh all of this out too while you're at it. Cool. So then, you know, you have your midpoint, and then you have your like second act twist, maybe around like chapter 29 is them finding out the brother was adopted. So still her brother, but different genetic makeup, which would signal to the ghost a different relation, maybe if they're going on like a genetic level. I don't really know how the ghost would know this, but we can keep it vague for the purposes of the story. A piece of advice I got when I was building my world for They Stay from one of my college professors was, as long as it's entertaining, people will suspend their disbelief with ghosts. So as long as it's entertaining, you can keep things a little bit vague. And then let's say 33 is your climax chapter where they confront the ghost. The ghost, things go horribly wrong. 34 is them managing to save the day. And then, like, you know, in chapter 36 or something, you can have the resolution, they save the farm, the end. Okay, so like, you know, a general kind of outline like that. And then you'd fill in all of these other boxes and you kind of have an idea, and that's what your outline would look like, so that when you went to write the book, this is, you know, only if you're a plotter. I know that there are a lot of pantsers out there who the idea of outlining what happens in every chapter kills their joy of writing. But, and you know, if that's you, maybe what all you need is like the first step is just kind of figuring out the major plot points. But if you're like me and you like to know what happens in every chapter, this makes it really easy, because when you sit down to write the book, what you do is you can like look at all of the different things you have written across your row, and you say, okay, this chapter just needs to find a way to incorporate all of these things, and then it makes the whole process just so much easier. It's amazing. So yeah, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed watching it, and if you did, please make sure to like it and subscribe to my channel. I post videos twice a week sharing the actionable writing tips that helped me make my own writing better. Writing is such a personal thing, and every single writer is different, so I just want to share what worked for me in the hopes that it may also work for you. If you like reading books about ghosts, I have a book out now that is the first in a series that is a young adult supernatural thriller about ghosts. If you're interested in checking it out, all the links are in the description. I hope you have a good week, everyone, and as always, happy writing.